My name is Kelly Hannigan, and I've always been someone who doesn't back down from a challenge. For 10 years, I dedicated my every moment to my grandson picking him up from school, soothing his tears, and filling his days with laughter. It wasn't for praise or recognition, just love. But love, it seemed, wasn't enough. One rainy afternoon, my son stared me down and said, "You made him wait for hours, Mom. How could you be so careless?" And just like that, the sacrifices I had poured into their lives were dismissed. There was no pause for my explanation, no room for understanding, just his sharp words cutting through me like glass. I stood there, my pride bruised, my heart aching. That day, I realized something. The quiet obedience I had shown over the years had left them blind to what I endured for them. I wasn't going to stay silent any longer. That night, as the rain hammered against the windows, I prepared for a confrontation. This story wasn't over, it was about to take a turn they never saw coming. Drop your city below, we want to see how far this story has reached. Life has thrown its fair share of storms my way, but I've weathered them all with grit and determination. I'm the kind of woman who finds beauty in strength, whether it's the resilience of a blooming garden after a harsh winter, or the unwavering resolve it takes to stand up for what's right. I've spent years being the cornerstone for my family, quietly holding everything together, even when it felt like no one noticed. But now, I'm learning to reclaim my voice, and trust me, it's louder than they ever expected. I take pride in the little things that bring joy, spending time with my grandson Barry, baking treats that fill the house with warmth, and cherishing moments of peace in an otherwise chaotic life. But beneath that quiet exterior lies a woman who's unafraid to fight for what she believes in. People might underestimate me because of my age or demeanor, but I've learned that underestimation can be a powerful weapon. I've been overlooked, dismissed, even silenced at times, but not anymore. Kelly Hannigan doesn't sit quietly on the sideline, she makes sure her story is heard. The young woman beside me stared at the emergency button as though it might suddenly offer salvation, but nothing changed. Her boyfriend's dismissal echoed in the cramped space, leaving her shaking with a mix of anger and helplessness. As for me, I sat there, staring at my phone, the screen still glowing from my failed calls. First Carl, then Ryanthe had both hung up on me without a second thought, leaving me trapped, not just in this elevator, but in the painful realization of how little I mattered to them. The weight of their indifference was crushing. Carl couldn't spare a moment to hear my voice, too busy dancing with his mistress. Ryan, my son, didn't even try to hide his contempt, calling me useless before cutting the call. And now, with the elevator looming like a tomb, the life I had sacrificed everything for the home, the family felt like a cruel joke. I turned to the young woman, her silent tears glistening in the dim light. She wasn't sobbing anymore, her anger having dried up the well of sorrow. "You blocked his number?" I asked softly, nodding toward her phone. She glanced at me, her jaw tight, her chin raised. "Yes," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the quiver in her hands. "He doesn't deserve my time anymore." I studied her for a moment, a flicker of admiration stirring within me. She had something I lacked: resolve, the ability to cut ties when she wasn't respected. Carl had hung up on me more times than I cared to admit, and yet I always forgave, always stayed. What had that ever earned me? Nothing but humiliation. The sound of footsteps echoed above us, faint but promising. The rescue team was finally here. Relief swept through the young woman's face, though she didn't say anything. I felt it too, but the weight in my chest remained a burden I couldn't escape, even when the elevator doors finally slid open. When I arrived home, limping and exhausted, I expected at least a semblance of concern. But as I stepped inside, the only greeting I received was Ryan's sharp voice. "Mom, you were late. Do you have any idea how much you've inconvenienced us? Alex was waiting for hours." Lucia, my daughter-in-law, chimed in from the kitchen, not bothering to look my way. "Dinner still isn't ready? What have you been doing all day?" I stood there, rain-soaked and injured, their words slicing through me like knives. "I was trapped in an elevator," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "I thought I was going to die." Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. "You're always making excuses." My hands clenched at my sides, a storm building inside me. For decades, I had endured their indifference, their criticism, their disdain. Carl ignored me, Ryan belittled me, Lucia treated me like free labor, and Alex's grandson looked at me like a burden. Enough. I stepped into the kitchen, throwing my apron onto the counter with force. "I'm done," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. "I have spent my entire life giving everything to this family. My time, my energy, my love, and for what? To be treated like I'm nothing? No more. Lucia turned, her eyes wide. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I'm leaving, I replied, meeting her gaze head on. I've packed my suitcase, and I want a divorce. I won't be your babysitter anymore. I won't be your punching bag. Ryan shot to his feet, his face red. Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're not leaving. You can't just abandon us. I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and unyielding. Abandon you? Ryan, I've been abandoned by you all my life. By you, by your father, by this entire household. You'll survive without me. Carl entered the room, his tie askew, his expression panicked. Cynthia, let's talk about this. You don't mean it. I turned to him, my voice colder than I thought possible. Oh, I mean it. You hung up on me while I was trapped in an elevator, Carl. What exactly do you think I owe you? For the first time, the fear in their eyes felt like justice. They pleaded, their voices overlapping, but I didn't waver. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the life I had sacrificed for theirs. I walked out of the house that evening, my suitcase in hand, the rain still falling in steady streams. The door closed behind me with a satisfying thud, the sound echoing with finality. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something new, something better. My life was only just starting, and this time, it belonged to me. Carl had left on before storming out. My knee throbbed, the bruises darkening into a grotesque shade of purple, a painful reminder of the ordeal I had endured. I sat on the couch, the first aid kit trembling in my hands as I cleaned the wound. The sting was sharp, cutting through the numbness that had settled over me. Tears slipped down my face, silent and unbidden, as the weight of everything crashed over me. For years, I had told myself I was used to this Carl's indifference, Ryan's sharp words, Lucia's constant demands, Alex's disdain. I had convinced myself that this was normal, that I could endure it. But tonight, something had shifted. Maybe it was the pain radiating from my leg, or the crushing realization that I had been trapped in an elevator, terrified and alone, and not one of them had cared. Or maybe, for the first time, I truly understood the truth. I couldn't take it anymore. I wouldn't take it anymore. The front door slammed shut earlier, their voices fading into the night as they left for dinner. Alex's taunt still echoed in my mind, his smirk a cruel reminder of how little I mattered in this house. I had given everything to this family, my time, my energy, my love, and yet I was treated like nothing more than a servant. A lump formed in my throat, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and sorrow. I stared at the dishcloth I had thrown aside, the kitchen still untouched. Carl's impatient voice had demanded dinner, but I had refused. For the first time, I had said no, and it felt like the smallest victory in a lifetime of defeats. As I sat there, the exhaustion weighing me down, my mind drifted back to the countless moments of neglect and dismissal. The time Carl refused to pick up Alex because he had dance practice with Vivian, his mistress. The time Ryan berated me for asking for help, accusing me of being selfish and lazy. The time Lucia rolled her eyes at me, treating me like a nuisance rather than a mother-in-law. And Alex, me grandson, who should have been my joy, looked at me with disdain, resenting me for every decision I made to protect him. I had endured it all, gritting my teeth and pushing through the pain, the humiliation, the loneliness. But tonight, as I sat alone in the eerie stillness of the house, I realized I didn't have to endure it anymore. I didn't have to sacrifice myself for people who didn't value me. I stood up slowly, my leg protesting with every movement, and walked to the bedroom. The suitcase I had packed earlier sat by the door, a symbol of the decision I had made. I wasn't going to stay here, waiting for their scraps of affection. I wasn't going to let them trample over me any longer. I grabbed the suitcase and wheeled it to the front door, my resolve solidifying with every step. As I opened the door, the cool night air hit my face, refreshing and liberating. I stepped outside, leaving behind the house that had been my prison for far too long. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something new. My life was finally mine, and I was ready to reclaim it. Ryan's smirk grew more infuriating by the second, his arms still crossed, his condescension dripping with every word. This whole tantrum, it's just a desperate ploy to get Dad's attention, isn't it? You don't actually have the guts to go through with it. I turned to him slowly, clutching the handle of my suitcase, the weight of years pressing on my chest. But instead of crushing me, it solidified my resolve. My voice came out steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. You're wrong, Ryan. I'm not doing this for Carl. I'm doing this for me. He blinked, his smug expression faltering slightly. Mom, don't be ridiculous. Where will you go? What will you even do? His tone was dismissive, as though he couldn't fathom a world where I existed beyond their control. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "That's not your concern," I said firmly. "I've spent my entire life worrying about everyone else, about you, about your father, about this family, and look where that's gotten me. I've had enough." The door slammed open behind us, and Carl stormed in, his face flushed with irritation. "What's this nonsense I'm hearing? You want a divorce?" He barked, his voice louder than usual, as if he thought volume could intimidate me. I stood my ground, meeting his glare without flinching. "Yes, Carl, I want a divorce. I'm done." For a moment, he froze, genuinely stunned. But then he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be ridiculous, Cynthia. At your age? Divorce? Where will you go? You can't survive on your own. Stop embarrassing yourself." Lucia appeared behind him, her arms crossed, her lips curled in disdain. "Honestly, Susie, this is pathetic. You're causing a scene over nothing. This is all because of Vivian, isn't it? You're jealous of Dad's dance partner. How childish." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing through the room. "Jealous? Of Vivian?" I shook my head, incredulous. "This has nothing to do with her, and everything to do with you, all of you. For years, I've been invisible in my own home, sacrificing everything, enduring your indifference, your cruelty, but not anymore." Carl took a step closer, his tone turning harsh. "You're being unreasonable. You've had a good life, comfortable, taken care of. What more do you want?" I felt a wave of anger rise in me, hot and undeniable. "What I want, Carl, is respect, something you never gave me. You've spent decades ignoring me, dismissing me, treating me like I'm nothing. Well, guess what? I'm not nothing, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Ryan, who had been silent for a moment, stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Mom, you don't mean this. Just calm down, okay? Let's talk this through." I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. "There's nothing to talk about, Ryan. You've made it perfectly clear where I stand in this family. I'm not here to serve you anymore. It's time you learn to take care of yourselves." The room fell into stunned silence, the weight of my words settling over them. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, Carl's bravado wavering, Ryan's confidence cracking, Lucia's smugness replaced with a hint of unease. They didn't know what to say, how to respond. They had never expected me to stand up for myself. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the door, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Just as I reached the threshold, Carl called out, his voice low and strained. "Cynthia, don't do this." I paused, turning back to look at him. "Carl, you've already done enough." And with that, I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed deep within my soul. The cool night air hit my face as I took my first steps into freedom. The world felt vast, open, filled with possibilities I had never dared to dream of. For the first time in decades, I felt alive, truly alive. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going to waste it. Vivian lived on the first floor, and I wasn't going to leave quietly, not this time. Ryan's attempts to minimize everything, his excuses for Carl, his dismissal of my pain, they all echoed in my ears as I grabbed my keys. My chest burned with a mixture of anger and liberation. If Ryan thought I would let this go, he didn't know me at all. "Come on," I said sharply, glaring at my son. "Let's settle this once and for all. You think I'm overreacting? Let's see what your father has been up to." Ryan stared at me, stunned. "Mom, you're not seriously going down there. Just let it go, okay? You're making a scene." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing. "A scene? Ryan, I've been silent my entire life. Not anymore. If you're so sure I'm wrong, then you shouldn't have a problem coming with me." I turned and headed out the door, not waiting to see if he would follow. The elevator ride down was suffocating. My reflection stared back at me in the steel doors, and for the first time, I didn't see the same tired woman I'd been for decades. I saw someone ready to fight for herself. Ryan fidgeted beside me, muttering under his breath, "This is insane. You're making this way bigger than it needs to be." I stayed silent, letting his words fall away like leaves in the wind. The moment the elevator doors slid open on the first floor, my determination solidified. I marched to Vivian's apartment, my heels echoing sharply against the tiled floor. Without hesitation, I banged on her door, the sound reverberating through the hallway. It opened after a moment, and there stood Carl, his face pale with shock. Behind him, Vivian hovered, her ankle propped up on a pillow and an ice pack resting against it. Her wide eyes darted between Carl and me, her expression quickly shifting to feigned innocence. Cynthia, Carl started, his voice tinged with false concern. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, forcing my way past him. I could ask you the same thing, I snapped, my tone icy. But we both know the answer, don't we? Vivian opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a glare. Don't bother denying it. I've seen the way you look at each other, the way he drops everything for you. So don't stand there playing innocent, Vivian. It's pathetic. Carl's face turned an ugly shade of red. Cynthia, you're embarrassing yourself. This isn't what it looks like. Ryan hesitated in the doorway, his expression a mix of disbelief and guilt. Mom, maybe we should just go. You've made your point. I turned to Ryan, my voice sharp. No, I haven't. This is the first time I've ever truly spoken up, and I'm not stopping now. I faced Carl again, my chest heaving with years of suppressed pain and anger. You left me to raise Ryan alone, to take care of your mother, to hold everything together, while you ran off chasing business deals. And now, after decades of ignoring me, dismissing me, you want to play savior to someone else? You have no right. Carl's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came. Vivian stepped forward, her voice trembling. Cynthia won. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Carl's just been kind to me during a difficult time. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Kind? Don't make me laugh. You think this is kindness? It's selfishness, plain and simple, and you're just as guilty for encouraging it. The tension in the room was suffocating, the silence thick with unspoken truths. Ryan finally stepped forward, his voice low. Dad, is it true? Is there something going on between you two? Carl's face twisted in frustration. Ryan, don't be ridiculous. Cynthia's blowing things out of proportion. But Ryan's eyes narrowed, his earlier arrogance replaced by something closer to doubt. Then why are you always here? Why is she more important than Mom? Why is she more important than us? For the first time, Carl faltered, unable to provide an answer. Vivian looked away, guilt flickering across her face. And in that moment, I knew I had won not because of their shame, but because I had finally stood up for myself. I took a step back, my voice steady but final. I'm done, Carl. I'm done with your lies, your betrayals, your neglect. This marriage is over. Ryan, I hope you're paying attention, because this is what happens when you treat people like they're disposable. Carl reached for me, his expression panicked. Cynthia, wait. But I shook my head, cutting him off. Don't. You've had your chances. Now it's my turn to live. I turned and walked out, the weight on my chest lifting with every step. Ryan trailed behind me, his face pale and his eyes downcast. He didn't speak, and I didn't care. This wasn't about him or Carl or Vivian anymore. It was about me. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations, their demands, their indifference. I was free. And as the elevator began its ascent, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. Ryan's face turned ghostly pale as I stepped back into the living room, the long, gleaming kitchen knife in my hand catching the light. His voice cracked as he stammered. Mom, what are you doing? Put that down. Carl's expression twisted into something between fury and fear, his bravado faltering for the first time. Cynthia, don't be stupid. You're not going to do anything with that. I tilted my head, my smile cold and deliberate. Oh, don't worry, Carl. I'm not going to hurt anyone. But you said I couldn't take anything that was bought with your money, right? Well, let's fix that. Without hesitation, I walked over to the suitcase, the knife steady in my grip. Ryan lunged forward, his hands outstretched. Mom, stop! You're acting crazy! I turned to him sharply, my voice cutting through his panic. Crazy? Ryan, you haven't seen crazy yet. But you're about to. Carl stepped closer, his voice rising. Cynthia, put the knife down. You're making a fool of yourself. I ignored him, slicing through the fabric of the suitcase with one swift motion. The sound of the blade tearing through the material was sharp, almost satisfying. I pulled out my clothes, one by one, and began cutting them into pieces, the knife gliding through the worn fabric like butter. Ryan froze, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process what was happening. Mom, what are you doing? Stop it! You're ruining everything! I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing through the room. Ruining everything? Ryan, everything was already ruined. This is just me cleaning up the mess. Carl's face turned red, his fists clenched at his sides. You're insane! You've completely lost it! I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. Insane? No, Carl. Insane was spending decades sacrificing everything for a man who didn't even see me. Insane was staying silent while you humiliated me over and over again. This is freedom. Piece by piece, I destroyed the contents of the suitcase, the remnants of my life scattered across the floor. Ryan stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling. Carl stormed out of the room, muttering curses under his breath, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them anymore. When I was finished, I dropped the knife onto the table, the sound sharp and final. I turned to Ryan, my voice calm but firm. You wanted me to leave empty-handed? Fine. I'll leave with nothing, but I'll leave knowing I finally stood up for myself. Ryan didn't respond, his expression a mix of shock and guilt. I picked up my now empty suitcase and walked to the door, my steps steady, my resolve unshaken. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, refreshing and liberating. The remnants of my old life lay behind me, but I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt free, truly free. And as I walked away from the house that had been my prison, I knew this was only the beginning. The chaos that had unfolded in Carl's household was nothing short of poetic justice. As I listened to Ryan's trembling voice on the phone, begging me to come back, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The very family that had dismissed me, belittled me, and taken me for granted was now crumbling under the weight of their own selfishness. Mom, please. Ryan's voice cracked, thick with desperation. We need you. I need you. Alex, he needs you. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Ryan, you didn't need me when I was there. You only noticed my absence when everything fell apart. That's not love, it's convenience. Ryan's silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost picture him, standing in the middle of the chaos, his face pale and his hands trembling. Mom, he finally whispered, I'm sorry. I know I've been selfish. I know I've treated you horribly. But please, just come back. We can fix this. We can be a family again. I sighed, my grip tightening on the phone. Ryan, I gave you everything I had. I sacrificed my dreams, my health, my happiness for you, for your father, for this family. And what did I get in return? Disrespect, indifference, cruelty. I'm done being your scapegoat. But Mom, he started, his voice breaking. No, I interrupted, my tone firm. You don't get to guilt me into coming back. You don't get to erase decades of pain with a single apology. I've found peace here, Ryan. I've found freedom, and I'm not giving that up for anyone. The line went silent again, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I understand, Mom. I just wish I had realized sooner. I closed my eyes, a pang of sadness cutting through me. I wish you had too, Ryan, but some lessons come too late. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my new home, the weight of the conversation settling over me. Tracy's words echoed in my mind. Who's really going to suffer in the end? That remains to be seen. She had been right. Carl's household was a mess, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Linda knocked on my door later that evening, her usual cheerful grin replaced with a look of concern. Susie, you okay? You've been quiet all day? I smiled faintly, gesturing for her to come in. I'm fine, Linda. Just dealing with some old ghosts. She plopped down on the couch, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Well, if those ghosts are named Carl and Vivian, I hope they're haunting each other instead of you. I laughed, the sound lightening the heaviness in my chest. Oh, they're definitely haunting each other. And Ryan's caught in the middle of it all. Linda leaned back, crossing her arms. Good, let them stew in their own mess. You, my dear, have better things to focus on, like what we're cooking for dinner tonight. Her words brought a smile to my face, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of contentment. My life was no longer tied to the chaos of Carl's household. I was free, and I intended to savor every moment of it. The sight of Ryan at my doorstep, knees to the ground, his face pale with desperation, was almost laughable. His voice trembled with emotion, thick with manufactured regret. Mom, please. I miss you so much. Ever since you left, the whole family has fallen apart. I've lost my job, Lucia's threatening to leave me, and she said she'll take Alex if you don't come back. Please, Mom, you've always loved me the most, right? The words dripped with manipulation, each one carefully chosen to tug at my heartstrings. But my heart wasn't easily swayed anymore. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, and listened as he continued, piling on the guilt. Even Dad, Ryan added, his tone growing more desperate. He said he'd dump Vivian on the spot and remarry you if you just come back home. Mom, we're all waiting for you. That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. I laughed. A sharp, humorless laugh that echoed through the quiet yard. The ridiculousness of it all was too much. They thought they could patch together decades of neglect and cruelty with empty promises and hollow apologies. Tracy had already told me everything. Carl and Vivian were prisoners in their own toxic war, their lives consumed by shouting matches and misery. They weren't looking for peace, they were looking for a new victim to shoulder their burdens. Ryan looked up at me, startled by my laughter. Mom, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. Please, I'm serious. I met his gaze, my smile cold. Ryan, you don't want me back because you care about me. You want me back because you need someone to fix the mess you created. You need someone to clean up your chaos, cook your meals, babysit your Sona, and I'm done being that person. Ryan scrambled to his feet, his voice growing frantic. Mom, please, I know we've made mistakes. I know we haven't treated you right. But we can change. We'll do better. Just come back and we'll make it work. We'll be happy again. I shook my head, my tone firm. Ryan, the time for change was years ago. You don't get to decide to value me now, when everything has fallen apart. You should have valued me when I was there, giving you everything I had. His shoulders slumped, his desperation replaced by defeat. He murmured, Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I sighed, my voice softening just slightly. Ryan, that's for you to figure out. I've spent my whole life solving other people's problems, now it's your turn. I hope you find your way, but I won't be the one guiding you. I stepped back inside, closing the door behind me with a sense of finality. Linda was waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed and a knowing grin on her face. Well, that sounded dramatic, she said, arching an eyebrow. I chuckled, joining her at the counter. It's always dramatic with Ryan. He's just trying to guilt me into going back. Linda shook her head, her expression resolute. Good for you for standing firm. They don't deserve you, Susie. You're worth so much more than that mess. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. She was right. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, building a life that was peaceful, fulfilling, and completely my own. As I looked out the window at the garden we'd planted together, watching the flowers sway gently in the breeze, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. My past was behind me, and my future was mine to create. As the days turned into weeks, I dove deeper into my new life, free from the suffocating expectations of my past. Linda and I poured ourselves into our food channel, testing recipes, filming, and laughing as we stumbled through the learning curve together. Each step was a reminder of how far I'd come, how much I'd grown. But it wasn't just the videos or the audience that brought me joy. It was the simple act of creating something for myself. For decades, I had cooked meals out of obligation, serving an ungrateful family who barely acknowledged my efforts. Now, every dish I made was a celebration, a reflection of my freedom and self-worth. One afternoon, as we prepped for another shoot, Linda turned to me, her hands covered in flour. Susie, do you realize how far we've come? She said, grinning. Look at us two old ladies running a successful online business. Who would have thought? I laughed, shaking my head. Certainly not me. But I'll admit, it feels good. For the first time in my life, I feel capable. Linda's smile softened. You've always been capable, Susie. You just needed the chance to prove it to yourself more than anyone else. Her words struck a chord, and I nodded, my chest tightening with gratitude. Linda had been a constant source of support, her strength and humor pulling me out of the darkness I'd lived in for so long. Together, we had built something beautiful, a new family, a new life. But as much as I tried to leave the past behind, it had a way of creeping back in. One evening, after a particularly successful video launch, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Carl. The sight of his handwriting made my stomach churn, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it carefully, the paper trembling in my hands. The words were as infuriating as they were predictable. Cynthia, it began, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize now that I made mistakes. But you're not innocent either. You abandoned your family when we needed you most. You turned your back on Alex, on Ryan, on all of us. I don't know how you can live with yourself, knowing the pain you've caused. If you have any decency left, you'll come home and make things right. I let out a bitter laugh, the audacity of it all stunning me into silence. Carl still couldn't see past his own ego, still refused to take responsibility for the wreckage he had caused. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, my resolve only growing stronger. The next day, as Linda and I sat on the porch sipping tea, I told her about the letter. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You know what his problem is, right? Carl can't stand the fact that you're thriving without him. He thought you'd fall apart, that you'd come crawling back. But instead, you've built a whole new life one he's not a part of. That's eating him alive." I smiled, her words resonating deeply. "You're right. And you know what? That's his problem, not mine." Linda raised her cup in a toast. "Exactly. To freedom, Susietto, living life on our own terms." We clinked our cups together, the sound ringing out like a victory bell. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. But peace, as I had learned, was often short-lived. A week later, Ryan showed up at my doorstep again, this time with Alex in tow. The sight of my grandson brought a pang of emotion, but I kept my guard up. Ryan looked worse than before, exhausted, disheveled, and desperate. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling. "I know you don't want to see me, but I didn't know what else to do. Alex insisted on coming. He misses you." Alex stepped forward, his small face timid as he looked up at me. "Grandma," he whispered, "can we come in?" I hesitated, my heart caught in a battle between love and self-preservation. Finally, I stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. We sat in the living room, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Alex clung to my side, his tiny hands clutching mine as if afraid I might disappear. Ryan fidgeted nervously, struggling to find the right words. "Mom," he said finally, his voice breaking, "I know I've been a terrible son. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." I stared at him, my expression unreadable. "And what brought on this sudden revelation?" I asked. My tone calm but pointed. Ryan sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Lucia left. She took Alex and moved in with her parents. I'm lost, Mom. I've lost everything." His confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. "Ryan," I said softly, "losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. Maybe it'll be the same for you." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from Alex's face. "When you have nothing left, you're forced to start over. You're forced to rebuild, and sometimes that's exactly what you need." Ryan's gaze dropped to the floor, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't know if I can do it," he whispered. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You can," I said firmly. "But you have to want it, Ryan. You have to fight for it. No one else can do it for you." As they left that evening, I felt a strange sense of closure. Ryan had finally shown a glimmer of accountability, a sign that he might be ready to change. Whether he did or not wasn't up to me, was up to him. Linda joined me on the porch, her arm looping through mine. "Do you think he'll figure it out?" she asked, her voice soft. I shrugged, a small smile playing on my lips. "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, it's not my responsibility anymore." We sat there in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky awash with shades of orange and pink. For the first time in years, I felt free not just from my past, but from the weight of other people's expectations. My life was my own, and I intended to make the most of it. The morning light streamed through the windows of my cozy new home as Linda and I packed the last of our bags. Our plan to vanish wasn't just an escape, it was a declaration of freedom. By sunrise, we were on a plane to California, leaving behind the mess that Carl and Ryan had made of their lives. Their games, manipulations, and endless demands couldn't reach me anymore. I was done being their scapegoat. I was done being anyone's prisoner. Carl? He remained trapped in his misery, stuck in a wheelchair, his charm long eroded by his rage and bitterness. Vivian, who once played the fragile damsel, had turned into his worst nightmare. Their fights were legendary, shaking their once pristine apartment like thunder. I heard she finally filed for divorce after one particularly nasty argument, but not before taking half of his dwindling wealth. The man who once believed himself invincible was left a hollow, broken shell. Justice. Ryan, ever the opportunist, didn't fare much better. With no one to bail him out, the bank took his house, and Lucia left him for good. She didn't just take Alex. She took every ounce of stability he had left. His attempts to guilt me into returning had failed spectacularly, and eventually, he gave up. From what Linda heard through her network of gossip, he was last seen working odd jobs at a construction site. Humble work might do him some good, or maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. As for Alex, I often wondered if he'd remember me differently one day. Maybe he'd grow to understand the sacrifices I made, the love I poured into every moment we had together. Or maybe he wouldn't. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never go back to being anyone's unappreciated servant. I had reclaimed my life, and I wasn't giving it up for anyone. Linda and I thrived in our new life, traveling across the country, capturing breathtaking landscapes, and sharing our adventures with the world. Our videos evolved, showcasing not just recipes but the beauty of freedom and second chances. Messages poured in from viewer stories of women who found the courage to leave toxic marriages, rediscover themselves, and start anew. One letter in particular stayed with me. "You gave me the courage to walk away. At 62, I thought my life was over, but you showed me it's never too late. Thank you for teaching me to love myself." Reading those words, I smiled. My old life felt like a distant nightmare, a faded chapter in a book I'd long since closed. Once, I believed a woman of my age was meant to endure, to serve quietly and accept her fate. But now I knew better. As Linda and I sat on a beach in Hawaii, the sun dipping below the horizon in a blaze of orange and gold, I turned to her and raised my glass. "To us," I said, my voice steady with pride and joy. "To freedom, to starting over, and to living life on our own terms." Linda grinned, clinking her glass against mine. "To us," she echoed, and to proving everyone wrong. The waves lapped at the shore, the sound soothing and eternal. For the first time in decades, I felt whole. Not because someone else validated me, but because I had finally found the strength to value myself. My story wasn't just about survival, it was about triumph. And as long as I had the courage to keep moving forward, I knew the best days of my life were still ahead.